Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would talk about my UFC 261 predictions. I'm going to break them down a little bit for you guys and tell you the fighters that I think are going to win and why they're going to win. So, we're going to predict the five cards that are on the main events, the pay per view main event. And for those of you guys that know, this is UFC 261, and it is going to headline the Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal rematch, which should be very interesting. Also, this fight happens on April 24th. Starts at 9 p.m. Apparently, going to be held in Jacksonville, Florida, in the USA, of course. So, should be very interesting. But anyway, let's get this started. We have five cards to predict, and I am going to predict them right now. So, let's get straight into it. So, the first fight we got to talk about is Anthony Smith versus Jimmy Crute, a light heavyweight fight. So, very interesting fight. Pretty much an up and comer that hasn't really, been experienced against top elite competition, and a guy that kind of, is experienced against elite competition, but is more on the downside of his career right now, and that is Mr. Anthony Smith. This is a decent fight. There's about three fights on here, in my opinion, that are, 50-50 fights. Very tough fights to predict. This is a pretty decent card. In my opinion, not as good as UFC 259, but still pretty decent. Anyways, who do I think is going to win this fight and why? Well, just to be honest with you, I got to go with my guy Jimmy Crute on this one. When it comes down to it, I think Anthony Smith, I think he's a tough fighter. He did used to be one of the top five guys, probably one of the top three guys in the light heavyweight division. I don't know if I would ever argue that Anthony Smith had a 100% A-class skill set, if you wanted to argue that. Some people may disagree, but that's just kind of my opinion on the situation. I think Anthony Smith is a decent fighter, but not only is he getting up there in age from what I remember, if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, but not only do I believe he is a little bit up there in age, he's just been on the more downside of his career lately, and I think that he's gotten more and more damage from these fights. He got pretty much beat to hell against Alexander Rakic from what I remember, and also against Glover Teixeira. He's been on a losing streak. He just hasn't looked overly impressive lately, and this is just a really bad matchup for him, in my opinion. Jimmy Crute is an up-and-comer. Dana White seems to be trying to push this kid, but he seems very talented. I've been impressed with him in almost every fight that he's been in. Now, he did lose his first fight of his career not too long ago. It was about, 3 fights ago, I believe. Somewhere around there. But he's on a 2-fight winning streak right now, so I've still been pretty decently impressed with him. We'll see what he does, but when I just take a look at this, I believe that you could debate that he's the better striker. I think he's going to come off as the fresher fighter. He's a big threat when it comes to punching power. He's decently skilled. I think he's going to be eventually a top 5 threat in the whole entire light heavyweight division, man. I think that he's that big of a deal, so we'll see what happens. And Anthony Smith, unfortunately for him, I think that he's just kind of a stepping stone for Jimmy Crute right now. I think that Anthony Smith more than likely is probably going to get knocked out in this fight if I had to predict. I do think that it is going to go to Jimmy Crute. I'm going to go with first round TKO or second round TKO. That's my prediction, and I'm sticking to it. We'll see what happens. But in my opinion, Anthony Smith is just a really bad matchup for him. Now, Anthony Smith has submitted some pretty decent contenders in the past, like Alexander Gustafsson and that one Swiss fighter. I forgot his name, Switzerland fighter. Ozdemir, that's his name. I believe he submitted both of those fighters, so maybe if he's able to get Jimmy Crute on the ground, maybe something can happen there. Maybe he can get him in trouble, but I'm not really sure. We'll have to see what happens there, because once again, Jimmy Crute did lose, about 3 fights ago, I believe, to submission. So we'll see what happens there. Anyway, so my prediction is Jimmy Crute. We'll see what happens, and that is really about it for that. I'm going with Jimmy Crute by first or second round TKO. So this next fight, Uriah Hall versus Chris Weidman. Very interesting fight. Both of these characters sort of had different upbringings in the UFC. When you take a look at Chris Weidman's career, I don't think that he was overtly liked by a certain amount of UFC fans. Ever since that he beat Anderson Silva in those 2 fights, and a certain amount of people and fans looked at those as lucky occasion fights, like he didn't win those fights 100% without a little bit of luck. So, a certain amount of people I don't think respected him for a very long time. But Chris Weidman, he, I think a certain amount of people did hate on him. But they're kind of both of these guys are opposites, actually. They're on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to careers. Chris Weidman, I think, was always a little bit underappreciated and a little bit underestimated going up in the ranks. And then he finally beat Anderson Silva, and he had the very high peak. He's one of the greatest middleweight champions of all time. And he ended up being very, very good for that division. But, you know, he used to be the UFC middleweight champion. He beat some very decent fighters, including Anderson Silva himself, which is a very great fight, or you know, a very great win. And then you have Uriah Hall, who, you know, I've not met a certain amount of people who hate Uriah Hall. Now, maybe it's because he's not a huge threat usually in the division, because usually if you're not a huge threat, you know, or as skilled as some of the other fighters, you're not going to have as many haters. So, you know, because, of course, with the best of the best, you're going to have a lot of lovers, but you're also going to have a lot of haters. I don't know anyone that hates Uriah Hall. I think everyone with Uriah Hall is kind of like the same thing a lot of people, a lot of Adrian Broner fans do in boxing, where they're like, man, I really wish that he would just live up to his potential. But so far, it's kind of been like, he's a great athlete, but does he really have the skill set to compete with those top tier fighters? And it's the same thing. He had so much potential on the Ultimate Fighter, and he was actually a little bit overestimated probably heading into the big fights. People thought that this guy would eventually become champion. That's how good he was on the UFC Ultimate Fighter. And he was knocking people out. Of course, obviously, he lost the Ultimate Fighter finale to Kelvin Gastelum, but here we are today. And the problem is with Uriah Hall, he just never has been able to get past that gatekeeper image. So, you know, this is really the fight to kind of show up in, and, you know, to see, will he be able to do something here? But, you know, enough of my rambling. Who do I think is going to win this fight and why? This is a tough one. This is, to be honest with you, I think that this is the closest matchup on the card. Chris Weidman, he did win his last fight. Pretty decently impressive, not overtly. It was like a 2-1 fight, but still against a decent opponent from what I think. So, not a bad fight, but Chris Weidman, man, he's just not looked great in recent years. He's been knocked out repeatedly. There's a lot of damage on that bus right now when it comes down to it, or a lot of damage on that card. It's about ready to conk out from what I can see. And Uriah Hall, I think he's about like 36 years old, something like that. So he's a little bit up there in age, I think older than Chris Weidman. But, you know, Uriah Hall recently, within his past 3 fights, it seems like he has improved a little bit. So I think that, you know, I to be honest with you, I got to go with my guy Uriah Hall on this one. And this is really the road to finally maybe become a top 5 contender in the middleweight division. You know, and a certain amount of people be like, well, what are you talking about? You know, Chris Weidman hasn't really accomplished that much in his career. What would make him a top 5 contender? I'm going to say that it starts the road, because sometimes, you know, you start, it's kind of like in the NFL football season. It can all be about momentum. Sometimes you beat those teams that seem good but not great, and then, you know, a lot of people say, well, that win is overrated. They're not going to do that much, you'll see. But then that team eventually goes on to beat the great teams because they have that confidence. They're on a roll. And that's the thing with Uriah Hall. If he is ever possibly going to be a top 5 contender in the middleweight division, he has to beat Chris Weidman, and in my opinion, he has to beat him probably dominantly, and in my opinion, he will. I'm going to go with Uriah Hall in this fight. I'm going to go with first round or second round TKO. I believe that Chris Weidman has a lot of damage on him right now, and I think if Uriah Hall hits him right within the first couple of rounds, I believe that he is going to knock Chris Weidman out. That is my prediction for that fight. I'm going with Uriah Hall. Another first or second round stoppage, in my opinion. That is my opinion. That is my prediction. I'm sticking to it. Let's go into the next one. So this next fight, Valentina Shevchenko versus Jessica Andrade, the first title fight of today. So let's talk about it. So who do I think is going to win this fight? I mean, I'm pretty sure it's a very clear answer. I think 90% of the world would probably agree with me on this one. I got to go with Valentina Shevchenko on this one, man. There's only one woman in the world that I would pick to beat Valentina Shevchenko. Well, at least in mixed martial arts. There's only one woman in the world in mixed martial arts that I would pick to beat Valentina Shevchenko. And even that, you know, is a bit shaky, and that's quite surprising because that's Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes actually had 2 tough fights with Valentina Shevchenko. I thought the first time they fought, it was 2-1 for Amanda. The second time they fought, you can really debate who won that fight. I gave it to Amanda, I think 3-2 after rewatching it a couple times, but you can debate that Valentina won that fight, man. So, I don't know, but either way, Valentina is probably the second most skilled women's fighter that I've personally ever seen in mixed martial arts history. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. Bottom line is this, man. The 125-pound division, in my opinion, is not that talented. Jessica Andrade might actually be one of the more talented fighters that she has faced in that division. But I'm not really even sure if Jessica Andrade is better than a Jennifer Maia, and a certain amount of people would disagree with me. Of course, Jessica Andrade used to be a champion. At the 115-pound division. I think that she got a decent win over Rose, but I think that something kind of just went, very lucky her way. I don't want to say lucky, because it wasn't really lucky, but I think that, she had a very good day with Rose Namajunas by getting her and slamming her. But I don't think that even at 115 pounds, where really she's probably not even a natural 115 pounder. When you talk about actual weight, she's probably at least a natural 125 pounder. But when I just take a look at her skill set, man, I think that she had a very, good move on Rose Namajunas. I don't think that she wins against a lot of champions, to be honest with you. I don't think that she beats a lot of them. She got beat up against Zhang Weili. She got beat by Rose Namajunas in the rematch. She once upon a time got beat by Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She's never, from what I remember, beat a huge championship caliber fighter in the other major weight classes. So it is what it is. Valentina Shevchenko, I don't see how she loses this fight unless Jessica Andrade is able to hurt her early and trap her up against the cage. I don't see how Jessica Andrade wins this fight. She is decently powerful, even though she's a smaller girl than Valentina. But Valentina seems to have an A-grade chin. I don't see Valentina as that hittable either, and she's got decent power too. So I don't know, man. I think that I gotta go with Valentina on this one. I gotta go with Valentina Shevchenko. I just don't see Jessica Andrade as having an A-grade skill set, and that seems very, dismissive of her because she won the belt at one point in time and won 15 pounds. But she probably, to be honest with you, when it comes to women's champions, she might be one of the weaker ones, and a certain amount of people overall will, disagree with me on that. She might be actually the weakest women's champion that I've seen, and a certain amount of people may possibly disagree that, well, that's not true, because there are some pretty weak ones, I believe, at 125. The 125-pound division is hands down the least competitive one out of all of them. But when it comes down to it, Jessica Andrade is, one of the weaker champions that the women's divisions have had. And, a certain amount of people may disagree, but that's just the way that I look at it. I got to go with Valentina Shevchenko. I think that she's a stud. What I will say is this. I'm actually going to predict that this goes to the decision. Would I be surprised if Valentina gets the stoppage? Of course not. She's Valentina Shevchenko. She's got decent power, excellent timing in her strikes. She's a bad girl, man. Bad girl. But when it comes down to it, I'm actually going to predict that it goes to decision. We'll see what happens. But Valentina Shevchenko by unanimous decision or by third round TKO. One of those options. But we'll see what happens. So that's my opinion for that one, Valentina Shevchenko. So right now I have Jimmy Crute, Uriah Hall, and Valentina Shevchenko. Let's go on to the last two fights. Zhang Weili versus Rose Namajunas. I am very excited for this fight. This is the best fight on the card, to be honest with you. A certain amount of people may not agree. In my opinion, this is a very close fight. And it's a great fight. Rose Namajunas used to be the former 115-pound champion, the former strawweights champion for women's, obviously. When it comes down to it, very, very interesting fight, man. Zhang Weili, the current champion, looked very dominant against, Jessica Andrade, and had a very tough fight with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, to be honest. This fight is so tough, man. I like both of them. I think both are pretty damn decent fighters. But if you were going to ask me who I am going to predict to win this one, I got to go with Zhang Weili. I got to go with Zhang Weili at the moment. The reason why is because when I seen Rose in her last fight, she kind of seemed really mentally affected in obviously a negative way after she was knocked out against Jessica Andrade, which of course a lot of fighters, would be. But Rose seemed to be affected in a little bit of a different way. And to be honest with you, I don't know if she ever mentally recovered from that. Because when I seen her in her rematch against Jessica Andrade, I thought she won the first two rounds, but the third round obviously went to Jessica Andrade. And to be honest with you, had that been a 5-round fight, Rose Namajunas probably would have been knocked down that fight, man. So It is what it is, but she looked tired. She didn't look like she had the greatest gas tank in there, which is weird. She just looked like a different Rose. So I want to see which version of Rose comes out in here. If this is the same Rose that fought Joanna those 2 times, if it's the same Rose from the first Jessica Andrade fight that looked pretty decent, I think Rose can very well win this fight. I maybe even would have put her as the favorite, but I don't know if that same Rose is going to come out here. So that's why I got to go with Zhang Weili. On top of that, even Rose at her best, Zhang Weili has a chance to beat her. Zhang Weili is probably the hardest hitter that I've seen at 115 pounds in recent history. Very hard puncher, very accurate puncher, very dangerous, decently fast. One thing I will say about Zhang Weili, though, doesn't have the most elite head movement, so we'll see what happens. But another bad girl, man. 2 bad girls getting in there. This is the greatest fight on this card, I think. Would not be surprised with whoever wins. I'll root for Rose a little bit because, I think that she's a very great fighter when it comes down to it, and I'd like to see her recapture the title. But if Zhang Weili were to win this fight, wouldn't mind that, a bit at all. She's a great fighter in her own right. But I got to go with Zhang Weili. And to be honest with you, I think it's going to be by 3rd round stoppage. Certain amount of people would disagree, but that's what I'm going with. 3rd round stoppage. Rose did not look like the same fighter to me, even though she still looked pretty good in the last fight against Jessica Andrade. We'll see what happens, but I'm going with Zhang Weili. And that leads us to the last fight of the fight card. The main card, Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal. Who do I think is going to win this fight and why? Well, last time when the first fight happens, Kamaru Usman pretty much dominated it, in my opinion, 5 rounds to 0. Some people would say 4 rounds to 1, but I thought it was 5 rounds to 0 for Kamaru Usman. Of course, a certain amount of people think that it might be different because Jorge Masvidal in the first fight was on short notice, and then this one, he is going to have a full training camp, or at least close to it. Do I believe that a lot is going to be different in this fight? No, personally, I don't. Would I be shell-shocked if Jorge Masvidal won? No, because he's a decent fighter. I think that he's a better striker than Usman. I think that if he lands the right punch or the right strike, I think he can hurt him and knock him out potentially. But, Usman is just one of those fighters. He's on that, almost on the same level of Khabib Nurmagomedov, where he's just very dominant in the wrestling, almost to a level to where you don't see it from anybody else. In that division, Colby Covington is pretty close, but I would say Kamaru Usman might even have a slight advantage over Colby Covington. Some people would say they're on the same level, but in terms of wrestling, it's very close, but I give it the edge to Usman. And his striking is not bad either, even though I wouldn't call it A class. I'd, say B plus. If it is A class, maybe A minus. But when it comes down to Kamaru Usman, man, just a bad boy. I think that Jorge Masvidal clearly is the better striker, the more accurate striker than Kamaru Usman. But I don't think Kamaru Usman is going to be trying to go in there and have a striking contest with Jorge. I think he's going to basically do some of the same things that he did in his first fight. And if he does have to strike them, stick his jab out there a little bit. Try to land that right hand on him, But at the same time, he's going to try to rough him up in the clinch and get him on the ground. I just don't see what changes in this fight, really. I don't know if Jorge Masvidal has the skill set that a Kamaru Usman does. Once again, I think he's the better striker. And Jorge Masvidal is not a bad grappler. He's a decent Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist. I don't think he has bad wrestling. He's not bad on the ground. That's not the problem. It's just that Kamaru Usman is just so dominant. Once again, he's almost on like a Khabib Nurmagomedov type of level. So we'll see what happens, but that is my prediction. I'm going with Kamaru Usman by unanimous decision. I don't think that he'll stop Jorge Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal is very hard to stop. To be honest with you, I don't remember a time in Jorge Masvidal's career, at least when I've been watching him, that he has been stopped. I've seen him drop before. I've seen him, get hurt before, but I've never seen him stopped in a personal fight that I've seen him in live. So, yeah, I think that Kamaru Usman wins by unanimous decision. And those are my picks. Those are my 5 picks, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of the video. Let me know what your guys' picks are. If you're interested in putting that down, we'd love to hear it. So my picks, Jimmy Crute by 1st or 2nd round TKO. Uriah Hall by 1st or 2nd round TKO. Valentina Shevchenko by unanimous decision or 3rd round TKO. Zhang Weili by 3rd or 4th round TKO. And Kamaru Usman by unanimous decision. So those are my predictions. Obviously, I'm hoping to get 5-0. I doubt that'll happen. That almost never happens. But we'll see what happens, man. Anyways, that's really about it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later.